Welcome to this explainer. Okay, we are jumping right in today. We're launching into what I like to call an intellectual true crime investigation to uncover the deep psychology of human nature. We're going to explore this fascinating collision between two legendary minds, and we'll look at why the study of criminals actually holds the absolute key to understanding how we can break free from a mediocre life.
Picture this: Friedrich Nietzsche, a philosopher completely famous for his radical rejection of faith and traditional morality. But surprisingly, he found his greatest psychological teacher in Fyodor Dostoevsky, who was a profoundly Christian novelist. When Nietzsche read Dostoevsky's raw accounts of Siberian prison camps, he didn't just see a bunch of stories about convicts. He recognized a perfect mirror reflecting his own deepest, most controversial theories about the human psyche.
So it really begs the question, right? Why did a philosophical genius turn to murderers and convicts to understand the human mind? Well, the whole reason Nietzsche studied criminal psychology wasn't to solve crimes. To solve this mystery, we have to investigate what he believed the minds of murderers revealed about our own hidden subconscious depths. He was studying them to crack the code of human potential.
Section 1. The sickness of the herd. To really wrap our heads around the criminal mind, we actually have to start by looking at the true villain of Nietzsche's psychology, which is everyday society. Before we can understand the criminal, we have to look at the baseline. Nietzsche had a pretty specific name for conventional society. He called it the herd. Think of it as this massive collection of fearful people who basically live an apathetic half-life just to avoid the pain that comes with true individuality. In his view, to be part of the herd is to suppress your natural, unique drives, simply because standing out is just too dangerous and uncomfortable. And you can see these exact characteristics of herd morality everywhere. The herd absolutely worships comfort, and they view literally any form of suffering as inherently evil. They demand complete conformity, but here's the really insidious part. They hide their true motives through self-deception. Because they secretly feel inadequate and cowardly, they embrace this sort of passive nihilism. They lull themselves into a stupor while secretly resenting and lashing out at anyone who displays genuine greatness.
But here's the thing. You can only keep the lid on human nature for so long, right? If the herd represents complete suppression for the sake of comfort, what happens when those drives just can't be contained anymore? What happens when these suppressed human drives violently break free? Well, that brings us to the psychological anomaly, the criminal.
Section 2. Anatomy of the criminal. Let's map out the psychological anatomy of the criminal mind and see exactly how it operates in stark contrast to the herd. Okay, to understand the criminal, we really need to understand a massive concept for Nietzsche, the will to power. Now, this isn't just about dominating other people. It's a fundamental subconscious instinct to assert your own unique existence and passions against all societal restraints. The herd desperately tries to crush this will, but in the criminal, the will to power absolutely refuses to be tamed. It demands to be realized, no matter the cost. Take the phrase, the bliss of the knife. When a crime is committed, Nietzsche argued it's this raw, instinctual explosion of that will to power. It's driven by a subconscious joy and destruction. It's a momentary, violent liberation that completely defies all rational thought and societal rules. In that split second, the criminal leaps right over the boundaries that paralyze the herd. And this is where things get really fascinating, because Nietzsche actually saw a kind of twisted nobility in the criminal. He called the criminal a strong human being under unfavorable circumstances, a perverted plant growing in dishonest soil. The crime is an honest display of passion and independence against a dishonest, completely hypocritical society. The soil, the herd, is sick, so the plant that refuses to conform grows up deformed and violent. But the story obviously doesn't end the moment the crime is committed. What happens when the criminal suddenly faces society's inevitable punishment? The prison camp and the crushing weight of their own guilt. Breaking from the herd is incredibly dangerous, and as it turns out, not every criminal actually survives the psychological aftermath.
Section 3. The weak versus the strong. Both Nietzsche and Dostoevsky recognized two distinct paths a criminal can take after the act.
We can basically split them into two completely different psychological profiles. First, you've got the weak criminal. After the crime, they become incredibly ashamed. They're terrified of their newfound independence, so they desperately try to justify their actions using the very societal rules they just broke. In contrast, the strong criminal refuses to be defined by society at all.
They accept their dark drives, refuse to feel shame, and stand totally firm in their independence.
Let's zoom in on the downfall of the weak criminal for a second. Dostoevsky gave us a perfect example of this with his famous character Raskolnikov. The weak criminal is driven by this subconscious madness, but once they experience the brutal reality of the act, they shrink back. They invent a rational excuse like, oh, I needed the money or I did it for the greater good, to cover up the scary truth that they just wanted to assert their power. Ultimately, they collapse because they try to act like a master, but deep down they're still thinking like a slave to the herd.
On the flip side, we have the strong criminal. Dostoevsky actually met men exactly like this in Siberia, like the convict Orlov. These individuals possess an absolute iron character. They face society's most brutal punishments with total indifference. They dedicate themselves entirely to their subconscious drives, despite total condemnation from the herd. They embody this raw, unyielding strength that deeply fascinated Nietzsche, because they proved that a human being could exist entirely outside of herd morality.
Section 4, the revelation of the Übermensch. So why spend all this time dissecting fractured, violent minds at all? Where is this all leading?
This leads us right to the absolute core of Nietzsche's philosophy for human potential, the three metamorphoses of the spirit. Think of it as a three-step evolution. Stage 1 is the beast, representing the herd, bound by duty and comfort. Stage 2 is the lion, which perfectly maps to the strong criminal. The lion is powerful enough to reject duty, tear down morality, and say a sacred no to society. But the lion can only destroy. To reach the final stage, the child, one must say a sacred yes to life and playfully create brand new values. That is the Übermensch, the ultimate ideal.
But here is the criminal's ultimate tragedy. The strong criminal is the lion, but they get stuck there. Exhausted by constantly battling society's hatred, locked in physical prisons, and burdened by their own destructive drives, they totally lack the psychological space and freedom to transition into the child. They can scream no to the herd, but they never achieve the light-hearted, creative joy needed to say yes to building something beautiful. They remain a tragic, unfinished figure. And this is the payoff. Understanding where the criminal fails gives us the exact blueprint for Nietzsche's ultimate ideal, the Übermensch, or the Overman. The Übermensch is the highest excellence of humanity. We're talking about a rare, creative individual who possesses the ferocious independence of the strong criminal, but transcends mere destruction. They overcome the passive nihilism of the herd and the active destruction of the criminal to actually forge new, life-affirming meaning.
This is exactly why Nietzsche studied criminal psychology so intently. The criminal is the raw, flawed prototype of the free spirit. They proved to Nietzsche that hiding from our dark, subconscious drives only produces a sickly, dishonest world. To achieve the Übermensch, you can't ignore your instincts like the herd, but you also can't be entirely consumed by destruction like the criminal. You have to face your raw potential, master it, and use it to affirm both the beauty and the suffering of an authentic life.
So, I want to leave you with a pretty provocative question to chew on as you go about your own pursuit of an authentic life. If society's blind pursuit of comfort just makes us weak, and the criminal's destructive pursuit of power ultimately makes them sick, what will it take for you to navigate that tightrope? What will it take for you to become truly, authentically free? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the world around you.